What's up everybody, welcome to the Potts Point Bookshop YouTube channel. My name is Simon McDonald and today we present you the first part of my interview with Australian crime writer Benjamin Stevenson. Benjamin is one of the most dynamic storytellers operating in the genre right now. His first novel Greenlight was a knockout and its follow-up, Either Side of Midnight, is even better. The guy is page-turning royalty and it was an absolute pleasure to chat with him. Hope you enjoy. So welcome to the Potts Point Bookshop YouTube channel, Benjamin Stevenson, author of Greenlight and new book Either Side of Midnight. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. Before we go anywhere else, tell us a little bit about your new book, Either Side of Midnight. That's out next week, next Tuesday on the 1st of September.
Yeah, sure. So Either Side of Midnight opens with a national television show, one of those nightly light entertainment kind of panel shows, you know, the ones that's got the big desk and the plasma screens and, you know, the cues to clap and laugh. And the host seems a little bit nervous as he goes through the broadcast. And as it goes through, the crew starts to think whether he might propose to his girlfriend live on television. And as he nears the first ad break, he turns to the camera, addresses it directly, and instead of proposing to his girlfriend, he pulls a gun out from underneath the desk and shoots himself in the head. His identical twin brother then starts to wonder if there might be something more sinister at play, and he calls in the services of my amateur detective, who's a documentary maker that used to work at the TV studio, to see if he can piece together how, in fact, a suicide that has been witnessed live on television by millions of people can actually be a murder.
It's a really cool premise, and I absolutely loved it. I love Greenlight, and I think this book is even better. It's so sort of tautly written and so well constructed. What was it like writing a sequel to Greenlight, and did you know you'd be writing a sequel to it when you wrote Greenlight?
I didn't. As you'll know, the end of Greenlight kind of wraps me into a certain hole that was an interesting challenge to dig my way out of, while also making Either Side of Midnight a completely standalone read. So in terms of series continuity, it is there, but it's absolutely standalone. So that was really tricky for me. But I actually started plotting this out because I loved the, I came up with the opening chapter and the concept, and I started plotting it out with the two main characters, the twin brothers. And then there's a certain thematic element in there with Jack's brother that I wanted to deal with. And there was no way as an author that I could realistically introduce another character with the same traits as Jack's brother and pretend that it was a brand new character. Sure. Without looking like I was copying myself. So the only way to deal with that theme, which I thought was really pertinent to kind of the power of words in this book, was to just make it a sequel. So Jack kind of wormed his way back into it.
Yeah, I do love, he's sort of an unconventional detective, is Jack. I really like that he's not sort of a stereotypical detective or, you know, crime solver. He gets sort of thrown into these mysteries, and he's obviously a television producer, but he's sort of not, your traditional crime fiction protagonist, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's something that I really wanted from him, as well as his unique kind of characterizations that are slightly different from the norm in the genre. A couple of things that I just wanted him to be real. Like, I wanted him to be a guy that was digging around a case. He doesn't really know a lot about the law. He doesn't really know or have great observational skills of the Sherlock Holmes kind of level. He's a very clever guy, but he often gets things wrong, and he can't take a punch. And so those are two important elements that I think, you know, I can't have him walk into a room with a serial killer and win in a fight. He will lose. So he's kind of a real guy from that aspect. And that sometimes he throws out theories into the air and they're completely off base, and he goes, oh shit, I've got to revisit that.
I think that's what I love about him. He'd be like me trying to solve a crime, you know, like just throwing out ideas and trying to, piece together evidence and sort of getting it wrong. I think that's sort of the part of crime fiction that sometimes you don't see. You don't see, you know, the main character going down the wrong way to unlock a mystery. You know, they're always, some of the traditional history characters like Sherlock Holmes are always getting it right. They're always sort of unraveling the red herrings. Well, whereas I think in reality, if it was me or you or anyone else, any normal person, you are going to sort of go down these dark alleys or these wrong places and not yeah, not be able to untangle a mystery as easily as you see on television.
Yeah, and I think, and Jack, I mean, I have to play to the narrative convention somewhat in order to make a thrilling kind of page turner that has that big denouement of surprise for the twist where it does all click together for Jack. But for me, investigating a character investigating a murder is just tenacity. I mean, Jack, his asset is that he asks enough questions to enough people until he asks the right question to the right person.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how he unlocks it, is that everything he does along the way, he thinks all of this, you know, was a bit me plumbing in the dark, and then I found the light switch and everything connects. And that's kind of what I try to do stylistically.
This book is so intricately plotted, and it's such a cool premise, like the opening scene when, you know, you've got the murder, well, you've got the suicide live on television, and that's such a like cool premise, cool opening. Did you know how the story would resolve when you started writing, or was it just you start off with this idea and from there you sort of try and pull on threads to see where the story goes? Do you plot out your novels, or do you sort of a pantser, as I think they call it? Do you fly by the seat of your pants when you're writing?
I'm both. I mean, I have to plot it out to get it across the line with my publisher, especially this book, because there's some stuff in it that sounds interesting on paper, and you know, it really kind of depends on the execution. But then there's quite a bit of pantsing as I go. So normally I have maybe the first third of a book really well plotted, and then normally I have the last 5,000 words also well plotted, and then I pants it through the middle and find a lot of things out along the way. But this book, I wrote the opening chapter and I thought, there's definitely a book in this. Absolutely. And then I sat on it for 6 months and said, how is there a book in it? How does this happen? And then I came up with the ending, including that there's one specific quite dramatic scene near the end. And I came up with that about 6 months later, and I thought, yes, I've got it.
That's really cool. So, well, do you think Jack will appear in another book? Is there a sort of, do you have, now that you've written a sequel, do you have sort of a series in mind? Or, you know, I know maybe it's a bit too early to talk about it, but like, do you see Jack continuing in future novels? If not the next one, then, you know, in years to come, will he be a character you return to?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question to think about. I'm writing my next book now, and it is not a series book. It's a standalone. I think he's quite amorphous in the space, Jack. So anything to do with, you know, the first one was podcasting, the second one is TV. I have a small idea for something about a radio station, which, you know, it would be very natural to just pretend that Jack pretend, it's all fiction, everything's pretend, but to say, you know, Jack could get a job at a radio station and get tied up. But it's also, he is a regular guy, and there's a certain amount of believability if I get to book number 19 and he seems to get tied up into actual murders. People are going to start thinking, Jack might be the one behind all these murders.
Yeah. Because big final reveal.
Yeah, there's too many coincidences. So at the moment, I'm really, really happy with the way that Either Side of Midnight closes off. But also, you know, it's open-ended. And if I find a story that I think fits his story, then that will work. Also, Jack is very character-driven. So one of the things, like I said, Jack goes into this book because I wanted to explore things with his father and his brother. I think I'd want to say something more about his character in his life. And my next book, it's probably a bit more plotty, I think, the way that I'm doing it. So Jack's probably not right for the next book anyway. That's what I'm saying now. He's going to worm. We'll see. He'll try and worm his way in. He's a sneaky dude.
That's what I often like about Michael Connelly's books, how you might have a Harry Bosch novel, but Mickey Haller might appear in, you know, a couple chapters, or, you know, a character from a book 10 years ago. They don't necessarily make a big appearance, but, you know, they're sort of in the background. I really like it when authors sort of, you know, build these worlds where even if Jack maybe isn't a main character, he could appear, you know, theoretically, like, you know, in the background on television, you know, whatever, while your new character is sort of in a bar or whatever. It's really cool how you can create these sort of amazing worlds in fiction.
Yeah, it's like, you know, Stephen King's Maine, you know, they all kind of interlock. I wrote a little short project which will be out on Audible, and, you know, a character obliquely references that there was a TV presenter that shot themselves on television. I never want to tie up the plots together, but I certainly think there's rewards to be found with people reading across all the books.
So you mentioned the theme before about sort of brothers and family, which I think are really important in either side of Midnight. What made you want to explore sort of that territory, brothers? Because even the Midnight twins obviously are brothers. Obviously they're twins. But you've also got Jack and his brother Liam as well. And obviously you're a twin too. You're part of the comedy duo, the Stevenson Experience. Did you sort of tap into your own life experiences to write about brothers and family in this book?
Yeah, I think Jack's, both of his books kind of center on, or at least his character center on kind of masculinity, how he interprets his masculinity himself in terms of his eating disorder. But so I think it's interesting to look at that from a perspective of relationships. Jack has a single father and a brother, as you say, and the twins as well. So I was really kind of focusing on how men talk to other men about serious things that they often don't or aren't able to well in that background. But in terms of drawing from my own familial relationship, I think there's little bits and pieces. I certainly need to make it much more dramatic than my life. I'm unfortunate. I always say to my parents that they raised me too well to really be a gripping author, because I don't have a traumatic backstory at all.
You can't mine your childhood. You can't.
No, I'm like, you could have lost me in a supermarket once, guys. Come on. But so there's little glimmers, but I've certainly expanded it out. My brother, I've certainly used elements of our behind the scenes kind of performance life in the characters of Sam and Harry. But he is quite annoyed that he thinks I've killed him off because one of the twins dies. But I've explained to him that the twin that dies is the handsome, charismatic one. And so he can choose to be annoyed that I killed him off or admit that I'm the handsome, charismatic one. So he's got to go in the middle somewhere.
You've written yourself into the perfect situation there.
Yeah, it's a win-win for me.